But I never said that. I really, if you ever quote me, I'm going to deny saying anything.
Your secret is safe with us.
Thank you.
So.
Geez.
And the 10 million other people that are listening.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I was just commenting as soon as to Andrew, as soon as we popped into the virtual studio here, and I saw my Christmas sweater. I'm like, I need to pull this up because all you see is like helicopters and bombs. Which I'm like, it's a Godzilla. It's a Godzilla. It says it. So for those who are only listening, I have an ugly, an anime ugly Christmas sweater on with Godzilla that just says fa la 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 Godzilla, and so that's the joke. But when I'm on video here, the framing, all you see is like helicopters and bombs,
and la la la.
This is not a pro-military, a pro-aggression.
See, I went far more benign. I've just got a reindeer.
Well, and does that one still turn on?
It does, actually.
All right, stand by.
Yeah, just a minute. I've got to work out where the switch is. Yes. Is that it? Yeah, there we are.
Oh,
yes,
wow.
yeah.
All right, I think that needs to stay on if you can stand it.
Okay. Until it gets really irritating, then somebody can just tell me to just turn myself down.
They're like the lights. You're like, no, not the lights.
Right. Lights are fine. Keep the
lights are fine. Tone yourself down. Now this is first of all, this is fantastic. Thanks for joining us on this wild adventure. But yeah, I mean, first of all, before we even start recording the podcast, like formally, also 1-800-CHAT-GPT.
Right. Who are you going to call? ChatGPT.
I have not seen this.
Oh yeah, so it's part of their the OpenAI, and we can certainly talk about this at length too, because OpenAI's 12 Days of Christmas. It was just yesterday. What day was that? 10, whatever they call it, I forget. But yeah, day 10 was 1-800-CHAT-GPT, which was. So it's kind of odd, right? So you can just literally pick up a phone in the United States and call,
phone the number, and you get ChatGPT.
And get ChatGPT. So you can, I love this idea that you can just dial in your hallucination, your Gen AI hallucinations now.
I was going to say, as I posted, I just think it's wonderful that sort of we've been plagued with all these sort of bots phoning us, and we're sick to the back teeth of bots phoning us, but now we can phone a bot.
Revenge will be mine. We'll be able to call. It was funny though, because apparently it's also available worldwide through WhatsApp.
Yes.
Has anybody tried it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it worked. How did it? What was the
it
experience
works.
like?
You've got a little disclaimer at the beginning, and then it's just like talking to ChatGPT.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah. So then the question becomes sort of, Joe, if you could call a friend, call ChatGPT, what would you ask?
Yeah, like what scenario do you have to be in where you're like, I need to phone a friend?
Right.
Yes.
Pub quiz.
Well, as a certified millennial, I don't phone people. The idea of actually calling someone and talking to them in real time fills me with anxiety.
So somebody ought to try texting it. Actually, text 1-800-CHAT-GPT.
Yeah, I wonder. I guess maybe that's the WhatsApp version, right?
Right.
Like, but yeah, same thing. I'm like, the last thing I do with my phone is, in order of like operation, is make phone calls with it.
Yeah.
Or answer one. If it's not a number I know, I'd never answer it, which, could be.
So I have to tell you, because somebody posted this on LinkedIn, and I was just totally blown away by the idea. You can, if you have an old-fashioned rotary phone, you can now call ChatGPT on your old-fashioned rotary phone. And I thought this was so wonderful. I actually hopped onto Amazon this morning, but I ran up against a problem. So you can buy a rotary phone for $50 or so, but you've got to have a phone service to plug it into.
Yeah,
Who's got a phone service these days?
Yeah, a plain old twisted pair. You got to have the old-fashioned landline for a rotary phone, right?
Well, I was going to ask, do you think that this is an attempt to get older generations up to generative AI speed? If you could call it, we don't call so much anymore. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. You're sort of your grandma sort of sitting there chatting away for hours with ChatGPT on the phone.
Oh,
yeah.
I'll pitch my 79-year-old father on it. I think I know how he'll react. I'll have the ChatGPT bot pitch him on it.
There we are. Yes.
There you go.
Yeah. No, it's wonderful. It was funny too, because I think I saw when I was reading into, so I was like, what was the story behind this? That it was, I think there was a disclaimer too that was like, well, right now you can do it, but we might change this thing. Because I wonder how expensive this will get for them.
Yeah.
But also that it was essentially like the result of it sounded like an internal hackathon of some kind. Which is pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
You can see these whatever, a group of engineers got together and like, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? And then here we go.
And I can be pretty cynical about it, but it is a fun idea, especially if it's just a time-limited idea. The idea that you can just sort of phone it wherever you are, whatever you're doing.
Yeah,
you can imagine you're in the grocery store and you want to decide what sort of chips you want to get. You phone ChatGPT and say, "What do I do?"
Yeah. That's actually, I hadn't thought about that, Andrew, but actually, because I was like, when would I ever call ChatGPT? But then that just reminded me, it's like, if you wanted to use it, and this happens to me a lot, and I don't know if this is a conspiracy or retail, where you're in a big box store and your data signal drops to nothing. And it's like, then you're prompted to sign into that store's Wi-Fi, which I won't do. So I'm like, so you're like left without an option for ChatGPT until now.
Yes.
Now you can just use the telephony element and give them a ring.
Yeah.
So,
anyway, we should actually get to our guests because we're sort of hogging this a little bit.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, then we'll do it. We'll give a quick pause. We'll roll our intro music and we'll get on to the introductions.
Initializing waveform.
Modulating signals for transmission.
Exploring the possible, probable, and preferable futures.
Welcome to Modem Futura. All right. Well, I'm Sean Leahy, joined with my again festively dressed co-host
Andrew Maynard.
That's we're getting the last bit of mileage out of our ugly Christmas sweaters
until next year, yes,
or the end of the year. But that makes this Modem Futura, the show that explores the intersection of technology and the possible, probable, and preferable futures, asking deep questions like, what will it mean to be human in the future? And today we have a fun sort of end of the year retrospective, prospective show where we can talk about all the fun things that kind of happened over the last year and what we are looking forward to perhaps in 2025 and beyond. And to do that, we are joined by two special guests. First, let me introduce Joe O'Rourke. Joe is an assistant professor of the School of Earth and Space Exploration. He's a planetary scientist specializing in understanding how dynamic processes deep within planets control their surface conditions over geologic time. Joe, welcome to Modem Futura.
Hello to the future. I'm recording this in the past. By the time you hear it,
and you literally are as people listen to it.
Yeah, that's right. And we're also joined by Katie Rowe. Katie is a doctoral student in the Human and Social Dimensions of Science and Technology program in the School for the Future of Innovation and Society. Katie's research sits at the intersection of human space exploration and space governance and policy, with a focus on integrating feminist and decolonial perspectives into planning for future space activities and infrastructure. Additionally, she studies the psychological and social impacts of long-duration human space exploration. So, Katie, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
And I know it was a great, did I get that all right? Was that accurate? Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Excellent. So 2024, not a lot happened, huh?
It was really pretty boring year. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there's still a couple weeks left.
Right.
That's true. We're recording this right before the end of the year. No, but it was funny because, in preparation for the show, I'm like, all right, let me grab a bunch of top stories in 2024 and what were the, and it feels like just the last month alone has been like a year's worth of tech innovation and news and all kinds of crazy things. It seems like between November and December was like an accelerated period of crazy insanity updates, especially with OpenAI doing their 12 days of Christmas here. It's sort of like this massive push right at the end, getting all these features out. But yeah, what a crazy year.
Yeah, and I was actually looking through it, and AI dominated everything. I was desperately trying to find stuff that wasn't AI that was interesting to speak about. And I think there are a few things. But actually, this is where we get to space. So maybe we ought to sort of start with space, seeing that both you, Joe, and Katie are at Space Geeks. Did anything interesting happen in space this last year?
A few things. My personal favorite had to be the launch of Europa Clipper, the multi-billion-dollar odyssey to Jupiter's maybe life-hosting moon.
Yeah.
And I didn't go to Florida for the launch, which meant I dodged the hurricane, unlike one of my grad students. But I feel like I'd already watched the launch because it launched using the same Falcon Heavy boosters as the Psyche mission. Which launched,
we ought to say that the Psyche mission has got a very, very close connection with ASU. There we are. So those of you who can't see the screen, Joe has got the Psyche mission patch on his top. Yeah. So actually, just talk about that for a second. So I know we've talked before, Joe. So this is part of our sort of our history, sort of talking on another podcast, the Mission Interplanetary podcast. And I know one of the things that we've talked about is life elsewhere outside Earth. So what do you think the probability is of us finding something on Europa?
Well, it's either there or it's not. So the probability is 50%. I think that's how statistics works.
This is why you get paid the big bucks for predictions like that.
Yes. I honestly don't know, of course. I think Europa is a great place to look in the solar system. I mean, it's a place where you have water in contact with the seafloor. There's been a wave of papers in the last years suggesting that Europa is dead and listing all these reasons why we might not expect much activity in the seafloor. I thought that was a really bizarre way to celebrate the launch of Europa Clipper, but I guess scientists are honest and publish what they think is true. But yeah, I mean, if we're going to look anywhere, I think we should look there.
Yeah. And the reason being, so you should explain really briefly sort of why this is such an interesting moon.
Yes. So a lot of moons out there in the solar system that are icy. Water ice is really weird, and its melting temperature decreases as you add pressure. Almost nothing else behaves that way. And so a lot of these icy moons, they're just capped with an ice shell, and below that they have these oceans of liquid water. And so they're the same temperature as Earth's oceans. And if the rock metal stuff under the oceans is active in some way because of radioactive heating in the rock, then you can get fluxes of nutrients and delicious electrons into the oceans and potentially have some energy for life.
Which is, I'm absolutely fascinated with this. And one more question, because we don't really want to spend too much time talking about life elsewhere. But okay, so one of the things I've got to ask you is, when we're talking about the possibility of life, what are we talking about? Are we talking about the little green men that decide to visit Earth and zoom around sort of New Jersey in drones, or are we talking about something else?
Yeah. For Europa, I think microbes would be what we're hoping for.
We're not going to get there and find everything sort of covered in drones with little red and green lights on because they're FAA compliant, even out there.
No, I think if there was a big techno signature, we probably would have noticed it already. Right. It's right in our backyard.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand the if there is life, we're most likely it will be at the microbial level. But I'm like, that is a little disappointing, to be honest. That what you want is this whole undersea elaborate society that has
Atlantis.
For real, right? Something spectacular, complex life forms. And I thought I pulled up the NASA site for the Europa Clipper project too. So it launched on October 14th, I think it was. And this is just the note. So for people who aren't familiar, this is NASA's statement on it, that the Europa Clipper is the first mission designed to conduct a detailed study of Jupiter's moon Europa, scientific evidence that the ingredients for life may exist. The spacecraft will travel 1.8 billion miles to reach Jupiter around in April. They don't say the date, 2030. So we got to wait some time yet. We got another 5+ years here to kind of wait this one out. But then once it arrives, it'll orbit Jupiter and conduct 49 close flybys. But Joe, on this particular mission, there's no probe or nothing will actually go down to the ice surface on this mission, correct?
No, but it is going to teach us what we want to know about Europa in order to design such a probe. So you'd like to drill into the ocean, but we don't know if the ice shell is a few miles thick or 100 miles thick, and requires very different modalities to get through it.
So do you know what happens? So here's an uninformed question. What happens at the end of the 49th flyby?
Yes,
Are they going to crash it into the
No,
there's a lot you can learn by crashing a device.
This is a really good question. So no, they're not going to crash into Europa. In fact, if they crash into Europa, they go to planetary protection jail. Because Europa
is contaminating it.
Well, almost
dirty Earth germs.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, and so they the plan is to scoot off to Ganymede and crash it into Ganymede there. But that raises a question.
There's a little bit of bias here, I feel, against Ganymede. We ought to have the Ganymede Protection Society protesting.
And you watch, we'll find life on Ganymede as a result of crashing into it and breaking through something. No, that's wild.
But I've got to ask. So, Katie, because I suspect that some people are thinking about this, I'm going to really put you on the spot, and I feel this is a cruel question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
I'm ready.
Okay, so you mentioned space and feminist theory. What does feminist theory bring to the table as we're shoving stuff out towards Europa and then thinking about crashing it onto Ganymede? How should we contextualize this?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, actually. So no worries. It wasn't very cruel, actually.
I can imagine sort of 10 o'clock at night in the bar, a few drinks, and somebody asks, how about this feminist theory thing?
Right, exactly. It's a great party topic to bring up.
That's what you want to talk about at that time is your dissertation focus and research focus, right?
Exactly. Well, I think when I think about, feminist theory, we hear a lot of we need more representation. We need more women in space science. We need more women in aerospace engineering, which is definitely great, and we always want more representation. But some of the things I think about is how we prioritize the values that we embed in the technology and the science that we do. So we've had obviously a certain set of values that have governed space exploration and space activity.
Sean has just demonstrated those, talking about smashing something into Europa. So that doesn't feel like the sort of values you're talking about.
Smash.
Right. For example, I think a good example, this is a great example actually, because I've seen some people talking about ecofeminism being used to think about the solar system. Are we more connected to the solar system? Or does planetary landscapes, do they have rights the same way we are starting to think that the Earth environment has rights? Should we not be crashing things into Ganymede or Europa despite planetary protection anyway? Are there other reasons? Right. And I think it's just, it's more of a framework to start thinking about other ways to do space.
Yeah. Which I think is really cool, and we probably ought to pull it away from space. But one final thing, because I think that touches on sort of slightly closer to Earth exploration. I mean, we've got expeditions to the moon coming up, and Joe, are you sort of connected in any way with any of that? I know Caitlin's thinking about these things.
I'm a bystander to most of the lunar missions, which is good because NASA is adopting the posture that they want to take more risks. And so that means a lot of the lunar missions are going to fail. And by not working on them, I get to avoid the stress of my precious little spacecraft getting shattered against the regolith. So
you're going to have to develop the cleanup drone that goes to just scoop up all the crashed.
Yes, although if you just wait 60 years, that's considered history and an archeological site you must preserve. So
before we leave space, though, in that sense, I have to bring up. One thing I did find on NASA for their 24 thing that did say that the year, 2024 was a record-setting year for launches. More than 80 launches roared into space from Kennedy and Cape Canaveral in 2024. And 2025, they say, promises to bring even more government and commercial missions to launch. So I think, looking forward in that sense, I think we're also seeing an increased investment in both governmental and commercial space exploration in that sense, whether it be just going into low Earth orbit and dropping off satellites or bigger missions, right? Even taking people to the International Space Station and then getting stuck.
It's still there. Yes.
And I know that we're trying to move away from space, but you did bring Joe and I on. So one of the cool things talking about launch capabilities and the focus on privatization is the speaking of Godzilla too, was the SpaceX being able to catch the super heavy booster in the pincers.
Yes.
That was really and such a cool thing to think about as we move towards more reusable rocketry, which is going to make even more launches capable, which is fascinating.
I mean, it's fascinating if I think so. This will be a thread I think maybe that will permeate throughout everything we talk about today. Too is we get sort of normalized to how amazing some of the technology and engineering is, to the point where you're like, oh yeah, that's sure, of course. But then when you think about it, like, so thinking about that exact thing, so some of those, and even before the pinchers, even just being able to reuse the rockets and land them on like a bullseye target on a moving platform at sea, and how amazing of a leap that is from an engineering perspective from, say, like the shuttle program, where it's like, where are we going to drop those boosters? The Atlantic Ocean.
Right.
And it was like, like, that was your target, right? Yeah. And now they're dropping these things basically in bullseye precision. Yeah. Not always successful, of course, but for the most part, I mean, it's incredible to think about what that represents in terms of the aerospace and whatever other engineering feats that go into that.
Yeah, and I think the thing that a lot of people miss is it's not just the things catching the booster, it's where that goes. So that then opens technologies, and it's the capture system and the reusability system for refueling in space, for developing sort of landing sites on places like the Moon and Mars where you can capture and then release again. So it's part of a massive ecosystem where we have to have these breakthroughs if we're going to do everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And as somebody who is a huge fan of space exploration, the thought of being able to one day have a, lunar base or whatever to launch vehicles and explorations from, eliminating that cost of, most of all the energy and rocket fuel needed to execute these missions is just to leave Earth's gravitation and atmosphere, right? So, and there's some crazy formula too. I forget what it is, but it's like for every pound you add, it's like the amount of fuel you have to increase to get the payload up and out of space just becomes this like runaway problem of trying to do that. One last thing I do want to mention about space before we leave that topic is my favorite spacecraft of all, perhaps, the little plucky Voyager 1. I mean, Voyager 2 is cool as well. But these are incredible. I was looking it up to say where they are now. And so, we're looking at something, I mean, it is incredible. So these are 2 spacecraft that are now out of the heliosphere. So these are the only 2, and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, these are the only 2 human-made things that are in solar system space. Is that correct?
Pretty sure.
Yeah. Unless there was something before us. I don't know. In our memory.
The dinosaur space program, yes.
Yeah, which has just been lost in time.
Yeah.
But it was pretty impressive, I hear.
Yeah. But these things have been, so both of these, so Voyager 1 and 2, they left within like a week of each other, 2 weeks of each other. So they've been in operation for 47 years. Well, of course, it's NASA, so it's 47 years, 3 months, 14 days, 4 hours, 34 minutes, 26, 28, 29 seconds, which is absolutely incredible. But one of the things, again, coming back to this idea of the human engineering part that I think is so fascinating is even this craft that left 47 years ago, something, I don't know, I can't remember the exact details, but tripped its sensors and safety arrays to shut down, switch to a backup sensor to basically preserve life. And yet, somehow we were still able to go, oh yeah, we got to switch to an old radio that hadn't been used in like 40 years to send communications to the satellite to repair itself.
Yep.
Like that is incredible. And time of flight, because I gotta love NASA. They have all the data right here on this stuff. One-way light time to Voyager 1, for example, is just over 23 hours.
Yep.
So just to send a signal at the speed of light takes almost a full Earth day.
Though I have to tell you, Sean, that is still fast compared to getting an email back from a faculty member.
Oh my God, that's beautiful. We've now just invented a new time scale. It's the Voyager. How many Voyager time scales did it take to get a reply
the Voyager.
back?
Yes. I've got a 10 Voyager
That's
mentor.
right. You got a V4 on your response time on that one.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. But yeah, no, I thought that was incredible.
Yeah.
Just the engineering that goes into it. And Joe,
it shows that even these robotic missions are really human missions, because if you lose the human knowledge of how to work these spacecraft,
absolutely,
even if the hardware is still working, you're not going to be able to operate it. So it's all about keeping the people engaged and supported.
Yeah. So just a real quick last kind of question on that. So with the new missions and things like that are designed, so if we think about, the Europa Clipper where we were just talking about, kind of this age-old adage of they don't make them like they used to. Are these new missions built with the same sort of like durability that we can expect these missions to last like this? Is that still the type of care that's gone into these, or are with the acceleration, are things just kind of like, yeah, we know it doesn't have to live that long because we're going to crash it into, Ganymede. So we don't need to worry about that. Or do they still take that kind of care and redundancy in all of these like sort of missions? Do you know?
We can do anything we want. The question is whether we're willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
So when you propose a space mission, you promise that it's going to do certain things. And so you engineer margins so that you'll have a good chance of doing those things. So actually, the cynical take is when a mission like this outlives its prime mission by like a factor of 10, it was overbuilt. Could have been cheaper and still achieved all of its objectives.
Right. Apart from the fact, and actually I want to ask this to you, Katie, because I think this falls in the sphere of what you study. There seems to be an aspect of care here. Care is one of these concepts. It may sound like a woolly concept, but people are thinking about it more and more in terms of technology. How do you develop technology where the interface between technology and humans and society reflects that aspect of care, which is so important to defining who we are? Is there a sense, and I know this is completely sort of left field, this question, but is there a sense that mentality of thinking in terms of care rather than just functionality could potentially actually lead us to creating technologies that are more robust over long periods of time?
I think it's really important, especially, and I think we think of space as pretty separate from humans sometimes, and we can even transition this into talk about other technology. But as technology becomes so much closer to our human existence and our human kind of functioning, care is going to be really important in thinking about how we interact with it and how those things are developed to allow us to interact with technology.
Yeah.
So care as in, what are things that we need to pay attention to in terms of like, I don't know, accessibility or who has access to technology and who doesn't. And, I think that does intersect with space in some ways, but I think it also is a lot about different kind of technologies we physically interact with every day too.
Yeah, no, I think that's great and important. And I get the sense that as we think about the future, it's perspectives like this that are beginning, hopefully, fingers crossed, to infuse into how we think about these technologies, even when it comes to space exploration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think, just to add on that too, I think, the high profile nature of space exploration also adds an opportunity to demonstrate the importance and also how to do those things with care. We were talking earlier, or the podcast episode is not out yet. For example, spacesuits. The fact that how do you these are incredibly expensive items, and how do you build them in such a way where you can handle sort of the spectrum of diversity of sizes of people? And but that's again this high profile nature of demonstrating the need and the intent to do that, then hopefully will also be sort of modeled at the commercial level things like that.
Getting away from this idea of anybody can become an astronaut as long as you're 6'4".
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Okay. What else is on the list? We've done space.
We can go lots of places. Should we, so maybe we need to deorbit from space.
Ominous.
You're right.
I guess,
controlled or random?
Hopefully a controlled one, yeah.
I was going to say, deorbit is just a very clinical way of being like, well, yeah, crashing it into Ganymede is deorbiting it as well. So we'll deorbit a controlled deorbit. But so, okay, trying to think of things that are non-AI, or at least non-AI right off the bat, because, that's, again, we can talk about a lot of those advances as well. Just coming back all the way, so consumer electronics even, so big news there. 2024, this is also when we got the Apple Vision Pro.
Yep.
Remember that?
So I didn't know when you were going to go there. I came prepared for this. But I'm going to have to disconnect from you for a second.
Oh, okay, do it. This is going to be worth it.
Let's talk smack about Andrew.
As I put on my goggles, and so this is so wonderful. I can actually see you all now, but yeah, if you're watching this on the video, it gets really bizarre. But I can't hear you, so I'm going to take it. In fact, actually,
Well, you
I
put
can
your-
these
put your
on,
headphones
so
on.
actually I can still talk
Look
to
at
you.
that. So Andrew now, so if you're just listening, Andrew has put on his Apple Vision Pro, and so he's sitting amongst us virtually here in our studio, but he's just got looks like a pair of ski goggles, to be honest.
There we are. Yes. Yeah. Completely natural and
And
normal.
see, again, how quickly that's normalizes, where I'm like, it's just Andrew wearing his Apple Vision Pro.
Yeah. So so Joe, Katie, have you had any experience with virtual reality with these things?
This is the closest I've got.
Right.
Poke you.
I've seen lots of stories about it. I've seen people driving their Teslas with their videos
geez,
of
yeah.
people driving their Teslas with their
Don't do that. Yeah.
Don't do that.
Vision Pro on. Don't do that. But
Anyone listening, do not do that.
but fascinating that I've seen lots of people talking about it and the usability of it and
Yeah. So
what it
I
does and
find-
doesn't do.
I find this fascinating because there's been a lot of bad press about the Vision Pro, and it came out to huge fanfare and then very quickly flopped. And now you have all these stories about its demise, how it was a technology that simply didn't work. I love my Vision Pro.
Yeah.
I could sit here for hours. I'm mainly working in it, but as an environment, I love this thing, and I wish the technology would take off.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because I think, like that device by itself is an incredible technology showcase. Like no headset released commercially has ever been done so with that much technology and power packed into it. I mean, just purely from a technological perspective, it is the most advanced by leaps and bounds, the most advanced headset you can purchase from a commercial commercial entity. But yeah, I mean, so one of the things that's kind of interesting about 2024 is it sort of bookends in a way, because we have the launch of this, so you have this amazing device, but the content, the things, I mean, it's sort of like, I think, what we're experiencing too is a little bit of some of that. We're going to try it out, test it out with early adopters, because we're probably, 7 to 10 years into a 20 or 30 year sort of pipeline.
Can I take this off, by the way?
Yeah, sure.
As cool as it is, I would like
normal,
to join
huh?
you in the real world.
It's not letting me. Excuse.
It's taking over. But I mean,
and now you sort of have the goggle eyes here.
yeah, now you have the ski mask, ski mask eyes. You're like, I just got off the slopes in Aspen. But what I was going to say is, I think one thing that's so powerful about that technology is as we start figuring out what is, as consumers, as professionals, as media consumers, whatever, like how are we going to essentially define what that is? I mean, we have other examples. The Meta Quest. Devices clearly much more around gaming and kind of social interaction, but much lower quality in terms of what it can actually pack in that headset.
And part of the challenge here, and actually I want to bring this back to space just for a second, and Joe and Katie. One of the challenges is, at the moment, you cannot share the experiences. So I can immerse myself in the headset, and it's amazing. I mean, forget about games, but my work environment where I have the screen that goes all the way around me. I mean, it's basically a 180-degree screen, is incredible to work with. Looking at panoramic photos from my phone. So I got panoramic photos that go back several years. And when you put them up in front of you in the headset, it is like you are there. It's impossible to describe. You have to experience it. It feels like you're back where you took that photo, just looking around. But again, you have to have somebody else with a headset. But then the other day I was watching some of these 3D videos that Apple has been putting out. And there was one, very recent one, where you are literally swimming with sharks. And the visceral experience is incredible. I've never experienced anything quite like it, where it feels like you are diving and you're interacting with these sharks. And that
interacting is such a soft word for shark encounters.
So I show this to my wife. She put the headset on, and the number of times she jumped and squealed because the sharks come right up to you. But going back to space, clearly space is something very, very few people can experience firsthand. And yet, I would say from my experiences with the Vision Pro, it should be possible to capture those 3D videos that really make you feel as if you're there and you're fully experiencing it in an immersive way. Even, looking at Europa, not with this sort of voyage, but maybe future voyages, is there a possibility that we could capture footage using probes that make millions, billions of people on Earth feel as if they're actually experiencing those environments? And if we do, how would that change things?
I think it would change things. I mean, if we all get the Neuralink brain chips, then maybe we can make people feel like the space sickness that like half of astronauts experience. So that might
authentic space sickness. Yes,
put a real cold blanket on space exploration. But yes, I think that would be amazing. It's something I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. I think there's some really interesting chances for virtual and augmented reality to assist with education. I know there are some scholars and students here at ASU where I go to school who are working on virtual field trips for geology students who can, using, virtual reality or augmented reality to literally sensorially take students to watch geological processes happen. I think space could be definitely, space science could definitely be one of those places where education could be really made robust by this technology.
No, I can absolutely see it. And I think we probably have to do it carefully. And I hate educational things. I'm an educator, so I should probably say that.
Sending this to President Crow.
I feel as if I'm being manipulated. If I'm trying to experience something and somebody's trying to teach me something through it.
You're on rails.
Yeah, I know. So I think you have to be careful. But I can see a future where I would buy one of these headsets to feel as if I'm experiencing space in a way that I couldn't do otherwise.
Yeah. No, it was funny. I was listening. I forget who it was now. Maybe it was Neil deGrasse Tyson on his podcast was talking about the sort of like the origin, the inclusion of like visible light cameras on spacecraft.
Just going to bring this up.
Yeah, and knowing that, like from the scientist perspective, that's one of the more less valuable instruments in terms of what they can learn sometimes.
Jim disagrees, I think.
That's not my statement, but really what that does is that pulls in all of the the human element too of that idea of like awe and wonder and being able to see these things rather than just collecting quantitative data about sensors reading different elements of a planetary body, but to be able to actually sort of see it or capture it, is incredibly transformational. For me, I had an experience like that. It was, I forget the name of it. So Joe, maybe, or Katie, maybe you know what it is. The mission that went to Pluto, Horizons?
New Horizons.
Seeing the images of Pluto come in as this like one flyby came through, that, I mean, to someone, again, to a non-planetary scientist or whatever, that those images were everything. So incredible in terms of what it did to understanding, like, it's not just this mysterious blob, out there that's been, kind of beat up over time. It's a planet. It'll always be a planet to me.
The Pluto killer was one of my professors in grad school. So
even if it's a dwarf planet, it's still a planet. But
he'll throw dry erase markers at you if you say that. Physical pain.
When you see that, you're like, you see the world that it is. That it is not just this disembodied thing that we know is floating out there. That it actually has characteristics. It has these things, and that's tremendous in terms of what it can do. I think also to the public in inspiring and promoting these types of very expensive projects and things like that I think is vital. Strapping new version, putting a Vision Pro on there or whatever.
So it looks, Joe, as if you're a proponent of optical cameras.
Yeah, I mean, the Pluto ones were used for science. It was the Juno mission that infamously didn't need an optical camera for its science goals, which are all about like the deep interior of Jupiter. Yeah. But they threw one on as like an engineering outreach student contribution. And now that's like the most popular result from the Juno mission. And it would have been like
you probably got
to leave it off.
Bunch of planetary scientists desperately trying to sort of work out how to lynch that student because they stole the limelight.
Yeah.
But instead of kind of tying it back to the Vision Pro, though, one thing that I was really excited. So this just was announced, like a week ago, if that. Maybe it was the beginning of this. Like, it was either Friday or like the beginning of this week. From Blackmagic. So Blackmagic is for people who aren't familiar, Blackmagic is a manufacturer of cinema cameras. So they specialize in kind of high-end 4K, 6K, 8K cameras. But Blackmagic, in partnership with Apple, just released a new camera that is called It's called the Ursa Cine Immersive, which is a spatial camera from Blackmagic. So if you look at this thing, it looks goofy. It looks like it has goggles on the front of it. Because if you've ever worked in 3D video or imaging, it's really difficult because to get a good spatial three-dimensional video or photograph even, you're trying to replicate the interocular distance of the human eyes, which varies from person to person. So it's very challenging to do. But what makes me really excited about this is now for the first time, we're going to be in the camera. And again, if anyone is thinking, oh, I'll pick one of those up, it's going to start at 30 grand. So it's meant for like film houses that will rent these things.
I was going to say in sort of space science, what's that really actually mean something?
A couple zeros.
Roll it in, slap that bad boy onto the top of whatever the next mission is going to be. But what I'm really excited about is for the first time, that will be a commercialized camera for exactly that. So think of all the amazing places that camera will be able to start to go into for people to do these amazing. So I'm really excited for, I think the camera will be available in like spring. So like March. So by summertime, I expect to start seeing some incredible content coming out of the Apple Vision Pro or for the Vision Pro and others. I mean, it works in MetaQuest as well. But
so now I can see 2025, the year of the Modem Futura podcast, going full 3D.
Well, who doesn't like a task like video editing? Let's add it completely spatial and 3D.
I'll hold you to it if I'm not awash in content in mid 2025. It's your fault.
Sounds like a plan. But I'm excited about that because thinking of all these cool places, scientific, educational, pure entertainment.
And again, it comes down to the experience. And again, I think you have to experience something like the Vision Pro to understand the value of it. But I can see it being transformational as long as you can get enough headsets to enough people.
Yeah. And that's a challenge, right?
Yeah. Okay, what else do we have on this list?
Well, I should ask too for our guests. Do our guests have anything? Any burning questions or topics that came up over
or predictions?
Because I have a whole list too I did a roundup of all the people's top 10 things for 2025 as well. So we can. We're ready to.
Katie, take your pick. Either something amazing that happened this last year or something that you think is going to happen in 2025.
Well, I was thinking about Neuralink specifically, and there was,
of course, 2024 was the first year that we had a human implant. Actually,
that's exactly. That's what I was thinking. It was in Arizona, and it was implanted. And correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew. I think you know the story a little better. In a person who was paraplegic.
That's correct. Yes,
and they were able to put the Neuralink implant in, and he was able to do things like play chess and utilize.
I think it was more sophistication than chess. I think it was sort of basically all these sort of, I don't know, Sean, you're a gamer. I can't remember the names of the games, but yes, there was stuff he was doing that he just couldn't do otherwise.
Yeah, playing Call of Duty or something maybe, or one of those kind of.
Speedrun Elden Ring, yes.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of like fear around that stuff for good reason. I think there should be some, careful consideration about it. But I think this is such a cool example of how some of these technologies can be used for things like accessibility. I think that's a great story from this year about technology. So that was one that came up to me as I was brainstorming for today.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great one. And actually, it's been really interesting. So Nolan Darberg, the person that had the first chip implanted, there have been challenges. It was a learning curve where initially they found a lot of those electrodes became detached. But you look at the way he's been talking about it, and you can begin to see how transformational it is to him. But here's the interesting thing. Sometimes I think we get so caught up in the need to be serious about these things, thinking about how this is going to sort of increase quality of life in terms of how he can sort of interact with his environment. The thing that has transformed him is the gaming. And it's easy to dismiss that as being trivial. It is clearly not trivial to him. It is something that defines who he is and what he can do. And I think that that's such an important takeaway, that sometimes it's the things that sort of elites may consider to be trivial that absolutely are not in terms of what makes life special.
Yeah. Well, even just taking into effect like what gaming represents, right? Yeah. So if you think of gaming as like, it's just a hobby of wasted time or something like that. I mean, that misses so much. I mean, nowadays too, I jokingly was saying like Call of Duty or whatever, but so many of those types of games, I mean, what you're actually, when you say you're gaming, you're actually engaging with a community, right? In many ways.
So I should ask, Joe, Katie, do you waste time gaming?
Are you gamers?
During the pandemic, I got an Xbox because I was like, oh, no one can stop me. I'm an adult. I can spend money on it. Yeah.
I've been
a
playing.
Great feeling, yeah.
I've been playing games a long time, so I've been gaming since I was a kid.
Andrew.
So
I
am. But it is. I mean, that's the thing. And so I think, for somebody who was not able to engage in that activity or whatever, to suddenly get that back, or to get it for the first time, even again, depending on the situation. I mean, that's a huge piece, because that is in many ways. I mean, Joe, I don't know how you or Caitlin, if you guys are, using how much, what type of games you play and that kind of stuff. But like for me, that's my old friends from high school and college and things and beyond. The only way we usually ever talk is through games. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's just, text messages here and there. But that's sort of like the social medium that we play in. It's a big,
and I've got to make a tie back here with the Neuralink implant, the Vision Pro, and spatial computing, which is the technical term. So now you can imagine. So when you put the Vision Pro on, the way that you control your environment is by looking. It tracks your eyes, and at the moment you just click your fingers. But you can imagine that all being controlled by neural implant and your eyes. So you could do pretty much anything in that environment simply with eye movement and with thinking. That would be pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably not for 2025, but maybe one day.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's a testament to the amount of technology that's in that headset and that's what's available. That's not what's in the R&D also, right? So looking at, and they, I haven't gone through the full setup for it, but even within the Apple Vision Pro, my understanding too is that their accessibility features, knowing that not everyone has two fully functional eyes, for example, or whatever, that there is a lot of accessibility features built in to help, the device. And in fact, even I think there was a story recently, a week or so ago, of Apple having users with either very limited or no sight at all using the Apple Vision Pro.
Interesting.
As a way of getting feedback, again, for their accessibility of how would a user who is either has no sight or very limited sight use a virtual headset like that in an immersive environment. So it's really interesting to see how they're approaching it. I mean, again, it's expensive. It's out of reach for most consumers, but knowing that this is the very front end, and over time, as the devices become cheaper, smaller, more whatever, that hopefully over the next decade, we'll start to see or maybe that technology move down.
Yeah. Joe, anything on your list?
Ooh, I was just, I'm space, 24/7, 365.
Right. So, Joe, do you do anything outside space?
Maybe not. This was, I know you don't want to talk about education, but this is the year that ChatGPT started being able to do my homework in my graduate level planetary sciences
So
class.
I love that. This is fantastic. You're saying that as a professor and academic, ChatGPT doing your homework.
Yes.
Homework you assigned or the homework you had to do?
A little bit of both. Well, I did. I as Katie knows, I enrolled in ASU as a non-degree seeking student. Took intro psychology this year to better manipulate people and shape them to my will. So
You're an evil villain in the making. You've got everything. You've got space. You've got psychology, manipulation.
Yes.
And Joe, I don't know if you've heard this episode, but this kind of falls back. A long time ago, we were having this conversation of why do villains always have a disproportionate number of advanced degrees?
Yeah, that would do it.
You're starting to show the roadmap here. You're like planetary scientist turned villain.
Yeah, being in this game makes you an animal. Yeah.
Yep. Escape. We just need to get you the white cat.
You can spin around slowly while
But let's talk a little bit about sort of ChatGPT and assignments. How's your experience been this last year?
It's been actually fine. My experience is that it hurts my heart because it's the students who are most grotesquely using ChatGPT to violate academic integrity. They're the ones who are struggling anyways. So I don't think a lot of sort of sloppy ChatGPT use is like getting by me. It's very obvious when people are using it as a substitute for thinking. And if if like students who are really engaged with the material are using it as like an aid to their educational journey, maybe I'm not noticing it, but also that's how it's supposed to be used. So I think what it's doing, as with so many things in modernity, it's just sort of magnifying trends that would otherwise exist. And so the challenge is to avoid like runaway bad outcomes with it.
So Katie and I had one of the best examples of the use of ChatGPT. Do you remember this one in class, Katie?
Oh, well, early in the semester?
This was the one where the student wrote a lovely piece about a class that hadn't occurred yet, even talking about the conversation we had in the class.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And the time travelers.
Yeah, well, that was my first thought. My second thought was ChatGPT.
right. Yes. Yeah, space always clicked in first.
How did you get the wormhole not to collapse?
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that's wild. Yeah. Also, there must be an element too, where there's like, whether you did the assignment or not, but then there's like a second category that's like a gold star for just creativity. Right. You're like, this was clearly the wrong thing to do, but I like what you were trying because it pushed pushed an envelope or pushed a boundary a little bit, to write a reflection about a future class session that hadn't happened. That's pretty good.
And it was the discussion that got me talking about what people were talking about in class.
Talking about how great the discussion was. Yeah. It was amazing. Yeah.
I've heard that from other instructors that, they'll assign people to go do events.
I mean, just as in terms of artificial intelligence, I mean, that's also this peek into some of the power of creating artificial data and synthetic conversations, knowing like this is the topic. So based on training data, what are the expected conversational elements? And you could do a sort of, a predictive retrospective on what we assume will be a conversation that will take place around, topic of choice, right? And that's pretty interesting to think about.
It is. And actually, I've had students, and there are plenty of other people working on this, where you actually set up sort of multiple sort of identities within these large language models to have conversations that tease out things. So, for instance, conversations between different philosophers, where, of course, you're relying on human data that's been generated over decades and centuries. But even so, you've got that possibility of teasing out insights that you might not otherwise have seen.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy.
Yep. And it's only going to get crazier from here on in.
So buckle up, Joe. It's going to be 2025 spring semester is going to be even wilder.
Right.
So let me share something with the panel here and just kind of get your hot take on this. So every year, the Future Today Institute, led by Amy Webb, usually releases this annual letter, which is a good read. I'll put the link to it on our show notes and stuff too. And it kind of just goes over, what we saw this year. And then, again, what are the top themes we're looking at for next year? But one of the things that Amy has been sort of talking about for a while now, maybe might even be longer than 2024, is this idea that we've entered a technology super cycle. So we know normally, these technology innovations, they have their normal hype cycles and things like that. But what she's really sort of proposing is that what we're seeing to help kind of understand and also prepare us for the massive increased complexities and uncertainties is this idea of a super cycle, that it's the convergence of these big spaces. So, I mean, obviously artificial intelligence is one of them. But so FTI really sort of putting this idea out there that living intelligence is sort of this next big wave of disruption that sort of combines artificial intelligence and the sort of advancements in sensors and biotechnology. And the sensors and biotechnology, far less, the innovations and advancements, they're far less visible to the general public than, say, all the flashy stuff that we're hearing from OpenAI and Microsoft and Google and Apple. But it's really these three pieces coming together that will represent this really massive disruption in this idea of living intelligences, of combining artificial intelligence with sensors that can recognize the world,
Yeah.
and also the biotechnology that kind of goes along with that. So I'm curious of what just from the panel, what your kind of gut reaction is to this idea of a super cycle, and what does this mean, and what does that trigger in your mind?
It sounds a little sci-fi.
It does, right?
Katie, please.
Katie, what are your thoughts? We'll go to you first. What's your gut reaction to that? I mean, do you dismiss it, or do you think this is do you think this is onto something?
I think it's interesting. I guess I'm going to be interested how. I'm always interested to see how people react to technologies and how technologies are being perceived and accepted. That's why I think like the reaction to the Apple Vision was so interesting. So as different big webs of technology overlap and start becoming more or less impactful or more or less important, I just think my main reaction was I'll be interested to see as this stuff gets more kind of coalesce together how people will react to it.
So you have a level head, and you're like, let's see how this. Let's ignore the hype and let's see how this plays out, right?
Well, because those of us who study and talk about this stuff all the time, I think we have a very opinionated take on it. But I think it'll interact with lots of different people from all walks of life, and I'll be interested to see.
I don't know, Joe, is this something you see from your area with, I guess it's sort of part of technologies coming together and having an accelerant effect there, but also sort of this fusion between the physical technologies, the biological technologies?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so much of what I do is still like human limited at the end, right? Like the technology can get really powerful, but the human ability to understand, what it can be used for.
Until you put a little sort of slice of organoid brains into those probes.
Yes,
so now you've got the I guess the proto-human actually on the probe itself.
Yes. Yeah, well, that is the hope. Well, I mean, there's a whole thing with space. Like, if you launch something, you have to prove it's reliable. So you end up using technology that's like 30 years old. So so we'll see. I mean, my take on the future is that the probability distributions seem very wide about what's going to happen. So I'm ready for anything.
I think that's very true. And it's very tempting to sort of see these things right at the edge of that distribution as being transformative. But most of those just sort of die before they get to the mainstream. And those that do get to the mainstream actually take quite a long time to get there.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I especially talking about this sort of this fusion of different technologies, and this idea of convergence is something I've studied for some years. This last year, we've seen a couple of breakthroughs around what you might call sort of biological intelligence or biological-based intelligence, where now we're creating cell cultures and pseudo-organisms that we can actually use for compute. We can actually use to make computers with. And there's all this speculation about whether you can sort of take one of these proto-brains in a petri dish, and literally people are creating sort of organoid brains out of human cell tissues, and these organoid brains can actually compute in some ways. And they're talking about attaching those to other computers. So now you've got this weird sort of bio-silicon hybrid. And I'm not sure whether this is sort of one of those edge cases that is just going to go away. I don't think it is. I think you're going to have some really weird science coming out of this.
Yeah. I mean, the first thought that comes to my mind is we're like, well, yeah, if you're trying to get faster compute, like what can compute faster? You know what I mean? Like, let's make these things.
But you realize this all comes back to what Katie was saying about Neuralink. I mean, as soon as you've got these chips plugged into people's brains, why not timeshare their brains? And I've talked about this for a while. Imagine you get this chip in your brain, and then you get this email that says, we're upping the subscription to $200 a month, but if you allow us to use a bit of your brain power, we'll reduce it down to $20 a month.
Oh my God.
All we need is to be able to sort of use your sleep hours to sort of plug your brain into this massive supercomputer.
Like we become, do you remember the SETI at home project where you would use the spare CPU cycles to, like, that's how you're like, I'm going to go take a nap. And while I'm doing the nap, someone's going to be using my brain for cryptocurrency or something terrible.
Hot take, Joe. Sort of, this is the future. How are you feeling about this? Would you rent your brain out?
I know my body is a temple, and none of you are sticking anything in my brain. I'm going to let some other large fraction of the human population do that first. No, but we were talking about games earlier, and I've been most recently immersed in Cyberpunk 2077, so I know what that whole thing can look like. It's not pleasant for the NPCs, let's just say that.
Katie, same response?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, it's just, I don't know that I would do Neuralink in
Anyway.
the first place. Any kind of medical process makes me nervous, so that
wonder
alone.
I wonder whether there's a correlation here between advanced gamers and people who say, no way, I've seen what the future is like and I'm not going there.
We've seen it.
Yeah.
Well, also, I'm like, I mean, you know, this is a far stretch, but I'm like, isn't this also kind of the first step of like the Borg collective, where it's like you still slowly, you know, allowing these implants to become assimilated, where
It all started with
you know,
Elon
you start
Musk.
to hear, you start to hear these voices in your head. But then the other thing I was thinking too, and I couldn't help myself. I'm wearing a Godzilla shirt, so I keep slipping into sci-fi and fun stuff too. But Andrew, when you were first describing the biological proto brain, the first thing that popped in my mind was like the Daleks from Doctor Who. It's like, we're going to create these, you know, ultimate killing machines
do that.
you know, have a single prerogative to exterminate.
They're not nice.
No. You're driving around in their little thing, you know.
So when we write our guidelines for the future, number one is don't become Daleks.
Yeah, just don't do that. Let's just spare the universe that you know, that sort of tireless thing. But keeping on like the intelligence thing, I mean, I think also, I mean, quantum computing has been having some interesting, even just as of like super recent.
I know with Google's Willow chip, which was really quite a big breakthrough. Yeah.
Yeah. Andrew, can you explain a little bit of what was important or what was notable about Willow?
Yeah. So there are a couple of things that are important. I mean, quantum computing is complex and contentious. And it's contentious because many people in the field still say that it's a solution looking for a problem. I mean, people talk about how quantum computing is going to change the world, but nobody's quite sure how it's going to do that yet. What Google did, though, is they created this really nice, compact chip with a number of qubits on it, which are the core of quantum computing. And the beauty of quantum computing is that it works very, very differently from digital computers, where digital computers just have ones and zeros. Quantum computers have many more different sort of undetermined states that collapse once they solve a problem, which means that they're brilliant at problem solving. What Google did is there is this hypothetical problem that these companies give to quantum computers to solve. And it's a problem that they know cannot be solved using conventional computers. So when they have a quantum computer that solves it fast, they say, this is brilliant. We've done something that no conventional computer could do. And this particular problem that they used to solve, I forget how many seconds Willow solved it in. It was a fairly short period of time. And they reckoned that a conventional computer would take longer than the lifetime of the universe to solve this. So fantastic, they said. Apart from the fact that it's a bit of a setup because this is a hypothetical problem that you could only solve using a quantum computer. So it doesn't really tell us anything other than that they've got a really impressive piece of hardware that nobody knows what to do with.
Well, you have to have something to do. We spend all this money on this gigantic machine, right?
Yeah. But one day, I think we're going to have some really intriguing quantum computers. I don't think they're going to change the world in some of the radical ways people think, but they're going to allow us to solve some problems that we just cannot resolve or solve in any other ways. And that's actually pretty exciting, pretty scary in some ways as well.
Yeah. And, you know, it's interesting too, because I know one of the things that was talked about was, you know, Google's DeepMind, also this alpha qubit that they came up with that was, I think, one of the advancements there. So in kind of conjunction with like the Willow element was also this ability to detect errors. So apparently these things also used to have and I might be butchering this as not an expert in quantum computing, but as the compute went higher on those quantum machines, the error rate also went higher.
Goes through the roof. Yes.
And that was one of these new sort of. And
you just need to look at one of these things and it changes the state and everything is. Yeah.
Apparently this new advancement, it really helps limit those errors to keep them. So as it scales up, the accuracy is either increased or maintained, but not. You don't get this increase of errors anymore, or at least in the limited testing that was done.
But actually, I'm interested in bringing this back to Joe and space because what Google are doing is a really intriguing approach to fragile and problematic systems. So, Joe, you were talking about the importance of robustness in anything that goes up to space, sort of over-engineering it. And effectively, what we're seeing with quantum computing is saying, you know, you can't just have one thing that you over-engineer. So we have many, many different things. So we've sort of got this whole sort of collection of sort of fail-safes. And I'm interested to know, actually, from both Katie and Joe, whether in space exploration, people have started really embracing innovative ways of ensuring reliability, which is not just engineering the life out of something, but it's creating many, many different redundancies.
Joe, that feels like a good one for
a
you.
great question. I mean, I think, like Sean was saying earlier, we've been suffering under the tyranny of the rocket equation. So everything has been designed to minimize mass. But things like Starship, these like sort of heavy lift reusable vehicles are maybe going to mean that your mission cost doesn't scale with mass in the penalizing way that it used to.
Right. So it's looking at a very different paradigm. Yes.
Yes. And then it's like, okay, well, we'll just send 20. Like you would never do that. It would be cheaper. Right now, it's cheaper to send one highly engineered thing than 20 bigger things that some of them will fail. But yeah, I think we might unlock this new paradigm of space exploration where we're not mass limited and we focus more on just having layers of redundancy.
And I know it's a bizarre connection between quantum computing and space, but I think that conceptual approach is really important here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and there's also a direct connection. I mean, I'm looking at just again, this is one of the reports out of the Future Today Institute where that's what they're saying is quantum is this next big thing. It might I think the tagline is it might have its moment in 2025, right? But apparently Congress has allocated just under $1 billion to the National Quantum Initiative, which is what oversees some of NASA's research in this as well. So. And I've explained it too when I've had people who have asked me just kind of, casually in a situation of like, what is quantum? Why is this important? Like, what will this do for me, the average consumer who's not in any of these advanced compute states? And one of the simplest ways I've also explained it too is, if we can conceive these and get these machines workable at a scale that is sort of measurable, basically the strongest security passwords you have become irrelevant instantaneously. And, and at first you might like, oh, someone's going to get my Netflix password. But
that's what the Chinese are going to do. 10 years from now, they're going to crack your Netflix password. And everything's gone.
That's it. But it's like, no. It's not just your password. It's like every password. Yeah. So all the national security stuff, all the whatever. And so even today, there are, I think Apple's got one. Google, I think, does as well. And a few others are pushing for new password. They're what are they calling it? Like post-quantum proof password algorithms, basically.
Or basically security systems that are secure. So the thing that keeps people awake at night with this, especially in the military, is countries have been collecting encrypted data for decades now. They've got vats of it, but they can't decrypt it.
Can't read it.
With a quantum computer, there's in principle nothing to stop them decrypting stuff that's old. But they are still incredibly valuable secrets and military secrets. And there's no way to stop that happening. And that's what is scaring a lot of people.
Yeah. Because if you think about it, it's basically a magic key that will open any door that was, that doesn't have one of these
shut in the past. Yes,
the new quantum lock on it.
So it's not just your Netflix password; it's everybody's Netflix password.
Oh, your bank account, everyone's bank accounts, like everything. Which that can be quite scary when you think about it.
Yeah. Okay, well, we've got that to come. Okay.
2025, y'all. Quantum, yeah. So, looking at the time, we want to make sure we could go on for another year, I think, on all these advancements. But just, coming down, here's a list of I'll just read this out. Okay. And then you guys get then I'll pick on someone to talk about one that you like. This is coming from Gartner's top 10 for 2025. So agentic AI, right? Do we give these things the ability to make their own decisions? Post-quantum cryptography, we were just talking about that. Spatial computing, we hit that one. Yep. AI governance, ambient invisible intelligence. I don't really know what that. Maybe that's
it's here already. You just can't see it.
What's the line from Poltergeist? They're here. Polyfunctional robots. So these sort of humanoid. Well, I guess they don't need to be humanoid, but these robots that can kind of do it all. Disinformation security, sure. Energy efficient computing, neurological enhancement, and hybrid computing. Well, we covered almost a lot. We've covered the lion's share of that list.
Yeah. So, Katie, any of those that jump out at you?
Some that I didn't know about. So those are cool. what is the invisible? What is that?
That's a good question. Ambient invisible intelligence. That's
I don't have anything to say because I don't know what that is, but that's really that's very
It's clearly
very
going to be
interesting.
the thing of 2025.
Right,
Invisible
right.
intelligence. You heard
Well,
it.
quite wild.
The energy efficient computing, I think, is cool too, because I think one of the things I see people talking about is how much energy and resources it takes to do like a ChatGPT command. And I think one of the cool solutions I've seen people talk about is how do we do energy efficient generative AI and what infrastructure and governance and regulation looks like for that. I think that's something we might see talked about this year in some way and in a deeper way.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a huge topic. I mean, just as we were sitting down to record this, there was news of Congress beginning to explore opening up federal lands for data centers and energy production for AI.
I think you can draw analogies between that situation and a lot of stuff about society. I mean, like even housing or something. Like, are we going to, because the other option, we could make AI more energy efficient, or we could have a renaissance of like small nuclear power plants. So we actually have like much more energy. And then it's okay if our energy needs grow.
3 Mile Island, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because what the future really needs is lots more power plants and portable power plants and small,
and what about fusion?
relocatable ones.
Right? Are we making advancements? I mean, there was some, right? That was this year, I think, right? There was some
there are always advances in fusion. I think the running joke
10
with
years
fusion
off.
is it's always 10 years
always.
away.
Somewhere out there, there's the robo taxi powered by fusion, some sort of micro fusion generator, always 10 years out, It's always out there. I'll propose this for our last topic. We'll end on kind of a happier, sillier note looking into 2025, because they've exploded here at the very end of 2024 is all the AI-based video generators. We have Sora that comes out of OpenAI. Google has launched a new one. I forget the name of their...
It's a weird name, yes.
It's like Evo or something. I don't even...
I'll tell you in a second, yes.
A hotkey, look that one up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, what do you guys think about these kind of things moving in? First of all, have you had a chance to play with any of them?
No, I'm excited
Not
to
the video
violate some
ones.
copyrights though. Yeah.
Google VO2 is the
VO2.
new one, although it's hard to get access at the moment.
Yeah. And they're all kind of like that way. I mean, I was fortunate enough, and Andrew, you were too, right?
I stripped through my credits on Google Sora within minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What was that like? What does it allow you to do? I honestly haven't seen much about the generative video yet.
So it is very limited in what it can do. So I liked it because of the surreal nature of it. So if you want something which is fun and kid-friendly and just entertaining, like sort of creating sort of scenes of Lego figures doing stuff or sort of furry monsters jumping up and down, it is fantastic. It just brings a smile to my face. If you want to do any serious cinematography with it, I'm not entirely sure it's there yet.
Yeah. I think it would be interesting. I don't have access to the Google one. I was able to get access to Sora. And it was interesting. So likewise, I got the first day, I was like, oh, cool. And then you try a couple of things and you're just like, I forget how many you get, like 1,000. The credits are kind of meaningless. You get a bucket of them. And it was like 10 minutes went by and it was like, that was 50% of them. And so I paused and I was like, I'm going to wait. And Andrew, I don't know if they did anything or I've changed or I found a setting somewhere, but I was able, and now I'm like nursing them and I'm able to like, what used to take up like 10% to run a job now is like a fraction of that.
Yeah, I think it's a learning curve to how you do that.
Yeah, so there's a way to like scale it back. So I've still got a couple less, and I have to kind of stretch those out for I've got like 20 days or 10 days for the rest of the month or whatever. But no, it's really interesting. And I would echo sort of Andrew's sort of take. If you're just looking for something to noodle on and to kind of just see what kind of weirdness comes out of these machines, it's fun. It feels very much like early day DALL-E, Mid-Journey stuff where you put something in and you don't know what you're going to get.
Create a picture of an astronaut on a horse, except now that it moves.
Yeah. Yep, and it can move. But the thing that I was actually the most excited about, because so some of the fun outputs I've had, some of these videos were so horrible, they were just like, delete, I can never unsee this. But one of them was funny. You get videos of like a torso of a person on a couch because it just didn't render the rest of the human.
You forgot to tell it that the person needs legs.
I was like, I forgot. Note to self in the prompt, put full person or something, or if you ever go to those magic shows and they saw someone in half, that the top half lives happily ever after on a sofa with not the rest of the body. But yeah, but to me, I think actually one of the things that I'm most excited about for those platforms to engage in is you put your prompt in and then you have this opportunity to go to a storyboard. And what's interesting about that is the way that it takes your sort of simplistic prompt and sort of builds a narrative description of it like you would for a traditional sort of media project or storyboard. And that part I thought was really kind of interesting of being able to translate, again, for people who aren't media or film people, to translate, like, I have an idea, and translate that into something where even if the output that you get is worthless, just the storyboard itself that it creates could be still very valuable in a traditional media setting even.
So here's a question. Seeing that Joe and Katie, neither of you have played with this. If you had the chance to create or ask AI to create a 10-second video, what would you ask it to create a video of?
I would have Mickey Mouse give speeches on the political issues of the day because I'm a incendiary chaos goblin.
No, I wanted something surreal. I didn't want something real.
Joe, here's the plan for you. The minute you get access to these things, I want to report back on how fast your account gets blocked.
Yes.
So, you're like, first try. I want Mickey Mouse doing something political, banned.
Katie.
Oh, man. I don't know. I mean... what a functioning space city looks like, what Europa Clipper looks like crashing into Ganymede. I don't know, something like that.
Actually, that would be pretty interesting. Yeah. So the reason I ask is one of the things that I really want to try with this is actually getting a bunch of kids just sort of putting prompts in. So you were my proxy kids here. But the reason is, and I've written about this, I think that this is potentially a platform for unlocking the imagination. Yeah, it does crazy things. It's not realistic at all. But you imagine a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old who's got this really weird vision inside their head of something, and they've got no facility to get it out into reality. This potentially, I think, gives them the ability to do that. I don't know, Sean, you've got younger kids than ours because ours are grown.
Yeah, well, it's crazy. It's going to be fun with them too because they were having a laugh. They were watching me do some of these explorations and were giggling along with me about the half person or whatever. But it is interesting because again, they come with this idea where they will be like, I want a dragon that's eating this thing or whatever. And so
I want that too. I want that also.
And what I found to be the difference between the frustrations I have is I will have this vision of what I'm hoping to get. Mm-hmm. And then oftentimes the delta of that is huge. And I'm like, this is not what I wanted. But with kids, oftentimes they don't have that, or they'll be, they're so much more pliable with, they're like, what would this and this look like? And then they get something, they're like, they love it.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to see how they would kind of push these things, or when you have that, again, hopefully with more time and credits with these things, being able to refine it and kind of go through that loop of what you want.
Yeah. I'm really interested. And of course, we should say that there's an age limit of 18 using this, but there's no reason why an adult can't sit down with young
use
kids
it with your parent,
and
use
play
it with
around
an adult.
And I'm fascinated to see how it evolves as something for unlocking the imagination.
Yeah, it is pretty interesting. And, again, Katie, what was yours? You wanted to see a functional space city? I'm doing one right now. I'm burning some.
Yeah, let's But sometimes I like AI giving it really broad. Because I think it's interesting to see what comes up. Sorry.
All right, so we'll leave it at just functional space city. I'll render this thing and whatever. I'll send it to you all, and I'll try to include it in the show notes. We'll see what we get.
Yeah. But I would also say, anybody can check this out. If you go to, I think it's Sora.com, you've got a whole list there of videos that people have created, and I just think they're wonderful. I could doom scroll through this all day because they're just so weird and imaginative. I mean, I'm looking at this now, and I'm looking at a video of a penguin dancing around a room. He's now having a bath and a shower, and he's in the living room, and now he's in a cot. You're probably realizing that actually there's zero depth to me at this point.
anything will make him laugh.
What's not to like about this?
Oh, that's funny.
I have a 2-year-old, and all toddler media looks like it's an AI hallucination already. This is
so this is going to be the strapline built for toddlers.
Yeah, you're right on it. You're right. Well, this is taking longer than usual. Well, there it goes.
It's the daily energy output of Sweden is being right now.
I think I had mentioned it directly to Andrew. I think the first, again, because we both got access on the same day, and it was the first output I got was so bad that I remember just looking at it and just being like, this is what we're burning the earth for? Was this like horrible monkey thing that I had created? So yeah, it was. Okay. All right. This is it. Here, I'm going to try. Let me see if I've never done this in this platform. Let me see if I can share my
video production on an audio podcast.
Oh, I can't do it. Yeah. We'll do this later. It's asking me. I got to do this.
But yeah,
I'll share the output because it's weird.
Oh, good. That's my favorite kind of result.
That's right. And I think that's actually a really good reflection on 2025. It's whatever
it's
happens.
Weird.
It's going to get weird.
It's going to be weird. Awesome. Well, then that's a fantastic place for us to wrap this thing up at too. So I just want to spend a special thank you to Katie, to Joe for joining us. You never know what you're going to get when you get invited to our podcast. So thank you for being brave and joining us on this wild adventure. And Andrew, of course, always my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, no, this has been great. Can I switch these lights off now that have been twinkling away on my
sure, we're running your battery down too.
Right, yes.
Sending those twinkle ins. But yeah, so we covered a ton of stuff, kind of looking back over 2024, which we scratched the surface of. This is, again, I do agree. I think we're in a super cycle of some kind with the amount, just the volume of stuff that is coming out and the speed at which that's coming, and will make for certainly an exciting and interesting 2025. So I'll put as many links as I can to all those rundowns that have the top 10 list. We'll put all that in the show notes so people can go explore and have their own curated conversations about what's to come. But yeah, amazing. Thank you all for joining, and we'll see you on the next episode of Modem Futura in the new year.
See you all then. Thank you so much, Katie and Joe, and thank you, of course, to Sean.
Demodulating signal.
Modem Futura is a production of the Future of Being Human initiative at Arizona State University. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. To learn more about the Future of Being Human initiative and all of our other projects, please visit us on the web at futureofbeinghuman.asu.edu.
End transmission.